Welcome back to the Explainer series by Forge College. Now in our last Explainer, we took a really deep conceptual dive into the scope and method for Solana's story in framing the capstone. But today we're enthusiastically pivoting back to the rigid mechanical blueprint of Bitcoin fundamentals. So grab your hard hats because we're looking at the exact step-by-step technical mechanics of Bitcoin mining.
Okay, let's dive right into today's agenda. Think of this as your step-by-step schematic for how a block is actually built and propagated across the network. Number 1, building the block header. 2, the Great Hash Lottery. 3, the mine window race. 4, the orphan block problem. And finally, number 5, securing the chain.
All right, starting with section 1, building the block header, or assembling the blueprint. So I want you to picture a massive, highly optimized factory. You know, a really common misconception is that miners are constantly crunching the data of every single transaction in a block to mine it, but actually they aren't. Instead, they are totally laser-focused on this tiny, highly concentrated 80-byte block header. In this schematic, you'll see fields like the previous block hash and the bits, which encode the network difficulty. Well, those are locked in place. A miner can't touch them. So to find a solution, miners have to constantly tinker with the other fields. And they primarily focus on that 32-bit counter at the bottom, the nonce, to change the mathematical output of their hash. Now, what if they need to shake things up even more? That brings us to the Merkle root. This is essentially a single hash representing the block's entire payload of transactions. Recalculating this root is kind of like hitting a giant reset button on the factory floor. It completely changes the block's hashing profile. If new, highly profitable transactions hit the network, a miner will update the Merkle root and step right back to the assembly line to try again. Moving right along to section 2, the Great Hash Lottery, spinning the hashing loop. To really wrap your head around this, it helps to frame the hashing process as a massive, high-speed lottery. Every single hash attempt is a miner buying one ticket, and the network's difficulty target, that's the winning number. And here is the aggressive loop they run to buy those tickets. Step 1, compute the Merkle root. Step 2, construct that 80-byte header. Step 3, run it through a double SHA-256 function. And Step 4, compare the resulting integer to the target number. They repeat this loop literally millions of times a second to maximize their tickets. But you know, here's kind of a fun mechanical limitation. What actually happens when you run out of nonces? The nonce field is only 32 bits long. In the world of modern, hyper-specialized mining rigs, a single machine will burn through every single possible nonce combination in a tiny fraction of a second. They literally just run out of tickets. So, how exactly do they get more tickets? Well, they use the extranonce, sometimes called the Coinbase extra. It's this super clever technique where miners slightly alter the Coinbase transaction. That's the transaction that actually pays them their reward. By changing this extranonce, it updates the Merkle root, which then cascades all the way up to the header, providing an effectively unlimited new search space. Boom, it's infinite lottery tickets without needing to rebuild the entire block from scratch. All right, on to section 3, the mine window race. Tick-tock goes the block. Okay, let's shift our focus for a second from the math over to the clock. Because finding that winning ticket is honestly only half the battle. Enter the mine window. This is the effective time window where hashing a candidate block is productive before a competitor broadcasts a solution. Think about it. A winning lottery ticket is absolutely worthless if someone else claims the exact same prize a millisecond before you do. Speed across the network is just as crucial as the hashing speed inside the machine. And this creates a really massive strategic divide. On one hand, you could have high throughput but a long delay. Like you've got massive hashing power but a terrible internet connection. This setup is less valuable, and it carries a huge risk of being overtaken. On the other side is the sweet spot, high throughput and a short delay, a highly valuable, perfectly optimized network. This is exactly why raw hashing power isn't enough on its own. Miners will physically co-locate their rigs and prioritize low-latency peers because slow propagation ruins a perfectly good mine window. Which brings us to section 4, the orphan block problem, a tale of two blocks.
So what happens when the network hits a practical failure mode? Like, what if two miners sitting on literal opposite sides of the globe win the hash lottery at the exact same millisecond? Let's follow a successfully mined block as it races across the network. Step 1, local checks. The miner makes sure they aren't broadcasting junk. Step 2, they broadcast an inv message to peers, basically saying, hey, I found something. Step 3 is remote validation. And Step 4 is tip adoption. Miners will use bare minimum data protocols just to ensure their block propagates faster than their competitor's block.
But alas, for one of those blocks, tragedy strikes. It becomes an orphan, or a stale block. This is a perfectly valid block that simply loses the propagation race when the network converges on a competing longer chain. Poor little orphan block, right? It did all the math perfectly, it played by all the rules, but it was literally just a millisecond too late to become the canonical truth of the network. It's just a harsh reality of physics and latency.
Finally, Section 5, Securing the Chain, wrapping up the mechanics. Exploring these complex, interlocking concepts is exactly how we demystify the backbone of Web3 infrastructure here at Forge College. Understanding this mechanical layer is absolutely crucial. So, to quickly recap what we've learned, hashing is fundamentally a probabilistic lottery. The extranonce brilliantly expands the search space when hardware gets too fast. The mine window dictates a block's literal lifespan. And faster propagation directly reduces the risk of your block going stale. The big takeaway here is that optimizing your physical network connections is a vital element of a miner's power, totally inseparable from their hashing hardware.
All right, let's see how all this builds into our next topic. Up next in the course, we're going to explore the economic dynamics around Bitcoin mining. Now that we understand the physics, the math, and the clock, we can finally study the economics and the incentives that drive this whole system.
But before we go, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought about strategy. Does faster network propagation speed change the expected payoff of your hash rate more than simply buying new hardware? Really think on that. It's a huge question of where a miner's capital is best deployed. If you want to dive deeper into this explainer and learn more about this subject and other Web3-related topics, be sure to visit forge.college. Thanks for joining me on this mechanical deep dive, and keep building.